Hey guys, Kate here. For this week's episode, we have Howard Thrash. Howard's been in the clothing industry for over 30 years and is the owner of HG Thrash. I really enjoyed my time with him and talking about why sense of style matters and learning a bit more about his background and talking about some things that he learned throughout his 30-year journey of being in a service-oriented industry. And so it was a unique perspective on leadership and some of the things he's learned. And so hope you enjoy this episode. Also, if you wouldn't mind, would you go and subscribe to our podcast? I mean, it really helps us on iTunes when you subscribe. And if you've enjoyed the podcast and you're a regular listener, if you have a couple of friends that you could refer the podcast to, we'd really appreciate it. We put a lot of time into this and want to keep getting better and adding good content and adding value for you as you listen and participate. Thanks for coming along the journey, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you. I really appreciate you being on the podcast. And, you know, for those who are watching on YouTube, they can see that you're going to be by far the best dressed, guest I ever have. And for those of you just listening, this is Howard Thrash of the famous HG Thrash. And so of all the guests we're going to have on this podcast, including the mayor of Lubbock, he is going to be the best dressed guest that we have, which I just love. Like, you can't probably see what I'm wearing, but I'm decked out in HG Thrash. So I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of your store, but even more of a fan of you and Jeremy personally. So thanks for being a good friend, and thanks for being on the show. So what I want to do is just start out by hearing your background. Like, I've known you for several years now, and can't even tell you where you're from or what your background is. So why don't you start there?
Born and raised in Dallas, from family that had been in Dallas for years. Came to Tech to study architecture, and worked myself through school selling clothes. Had done it in high school. Got through architecture school, and the guy that I worked for, made me, I went to him and said, look, next semester you're not going to see me much. I've got to do thesis and programming, and it's just a horrendous semester, and I'll be here as much as I can. But he said, well, why don't let's come to my house on Friday night, and we'll have dinner, we'll talk about it. And so he made me the offer I couldn't refuse, and I stayed with him and became a part of his company and a partner in his company, and had been working for him for a number of years. And then within 3 or 5 years after that, I tried to buy him out, and that didn't work out. That's a whole other chapter in a book. But
what was the name of the store you were working?
It's called Stephen Craig.
Okay.
And it was the guy's name was Stephen Craig Jansen. Great guy. We had lots of great memories together. Matter of fact, I'm still conversant with him. We still talk, a couple, 3 or 4 times a year, probably. And
how long was his store? I mean, I've never heard of it.
His store was there from 75 to 80. I opened in 89. He went out of business in 89.
Okay.
Or really, he sold it in 88 to another guy.
Okay.
And that guy went out of business in 89.
Okay.
Ish.
Sure.
Maybe 89 and a half. I'm not remembering.
Hey, on this podcast, we're loose with numbers, okay?
Yeah.
We don't pay attention to the numbers, okay?
I don't think we get too much trouble.
Yeah. That's great.
So did that, and then realized that the writing was on the wall that I wasn't going to be able to take ownership of that particular business. And so I left that company, and for about a year or so, year and a half, I did what I could. And one of the jobs was, my main job was I drove a mail truck. And I picked up, worked for a contractor and would pick up mail, and the biggest truck that's less than a 18-wheeler. Okay. So it was it's a big box truck, and I would haul mail back and forth between the airport, pick up, I got to pick up dead bodies at the airport, put it in there, and all kinds of fun stuff. And I did other things, but that was my main thing. And so I did that at night, overnight, and in the daytime I would try to put that store together, and it.
Well, what was that like early on? I mean, so it sounds like while you were working and delivering mail and delivery and all that stuff, you just said you were working on starting your own store. So, like, do you remember, like, I guess I have several questions for you. So first of all, like, is there a time that you can remember where it became really clear to you that you really desired to own your own thing? So that's one question for you. And then two, do you remember what it was like, when you were kind of doing double time? Because a lot of people would love to kind of own their own business and they don't really know how to kind of like work through the reality of the moment versus the reality of what they're trying to create. And so it's really hard to, that balance getting something started and being able to be all in. So when's the first time you remember wanting to really own your own thing?
I don't really recall that part of it. I think the answer to your question is what someone has to get their arms around is we talk about these things, but people don't execute these things. So your goal is to do this. You're going to do this. Most of us say, it would be nice to be I would love to be a pilot. I really would love to be a pilot. But they don't set the goal to be a pilot. They just think it would be neat to be a pilot. They don't realize what the magnitude of what it's going to take to get from point A to point B, and they don't have a map to do it. So I guess the answer to your question is not so much when did I made my mind up, this is what I was going to do. One of the things that's very fresh in my mind still today is that one of my best friends at the time, we went to college together, and he was in Midland being an oil and gas guy, and he said, when are you going to quit trying to do this? This is this is a crazy thing to try to do. The economy was terrible. It was and I literally told him they're going to have to shoot me in the head and drag me out by my feet. I'm going to get this done. I may be wrong, probably am wrong, but we're going to see it to its end. We're going to see it to its end. There is a finish line out there, and we're going to see it to its end. And so that, I guess, that may or may not answer your question.
No, that's good. Yeah. At what point do you think you had like a real strong sense of style? Because you don't just start slobs don't create men's clothing stores.
It had to come from my parents, partly. My father, for sure. My father was the kind of guy that came home from work, and I can remember this when I was very young. He came home from work and would take off his be at work tie and put on his be at home tie.
He wore ties.
And he would take off he would leave his suit trousers on, take a suit coat off, and put on a jacket or a sweater or something. It was, I remember that, and but it wasn't from my father. It was just every man at that time was that way. Every gentleman that was educated and had a real job. So liked clothes, I guess, from the start. What really got me in the clothing thing was I asked my mother to buy me some shirts like my cousins, my wealthy cousins had, and she said, we can't afford it, and I was working at the Safeway at the time, sacking groceries, and she said, why don't you just get a job in a clothing store, and that way you can get a discount. Yeah. My mother's Scotch Irish, and so she always was enthusiastic about a discount. So that said, that's how it started. I started when I was 15 doing that, and it was just kind of, I don't remember not being a part of this. Yeah. What I do.
That's fascinating.
It is what I do.
Why do you think style matters, or does it matter? Like if someone were if you were having a conversation with someone about, whether having a sense of style and, wearing quality clothes and really having a vision for one's style, like, does that matter? And if it does matter, what kind of story would you tell around that?
Well, it does matter. And if, the reason it matters is because, it matters. It matters whether people want to admit it or not. Yeah. I guess there's lots of ways of robbing this train we're talking about here. But it matters. If you don't think it matters, then you wouldn't see advertisements. You don't, everybody. why does it matter? What is it? I don't know really the question.
Why does style matter? I can tell a major difference when I walk in a room and what I'm wearing is intentional and what I'm wearing is nice, versus if I were to walk in a room as a slob. And so for someone who spent 30 plus years, in men's fashion, I'm just curious as to why you personally think having a sense of style and taking, the way that you dress and things of that nature seriously, what would be your biggest selling point in terms of why those things matter?
Well, so I'll go through a few of the conversations that are always said, and everybody's heard them. You only get one chance to make a first impression. Mm-hmm. It's rudimentary, it's crude, but it is so true. That's what they're going to. It'll take you years to wash off the first impression that you give someone. Mm. It may be just the way you acted or what you said, but first impressions are very important. A couple of true stories. My wife and I, when my children, this was a few years ago, my children were smaller. It was a tradition in our home to go to the Lions Club Pancake Festival. And my routine was I would get up and I would go to work until about 8 o'clock in the morning, and then I would go home and pick them up, and I would take the two boys in their pajamas and Julie in her Saturday morning comfort clothes, and me in my Saturdays I always wore a sports coat and tie, and we go to the thing, and sure enough, it's a line of 100 people long, and I'm exaggerating, which I tend to do too much, but this woman kind of waves me up to the front of the line, and I'm like, "You talking to me?" And she's like, "Yeah, you." And yeah, what can I do for you? And she goes, "Well, don't you want pancakes?" And I went, "Well, yeah, but we're in line for pancakes." She said, "Oh no, you what do you need?" And I said, "Well, I got my family." "Oh, well, bring them up here." And so we all usher to the front of the line, and they give the boys, extra piece of this and whatever of that, and we go sit down. And I looked at my wife. I said, "What just happened?" And she said, "Well, look at you." And this has happened so many times in my life, and to our customers. Our customers get, whether used to, they would pick people to get on. This is well before your day, but they used to look at, there was a group of guys standing there on the wait list to get on in first class, to get bumped to first class, because it was basically free back in the day. And if you were dressed well, guess what? You got to go to the front of the airplane.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I've answered your question.
Yeah,
I just rambled.
Yeah,
but,
no, I think first impressions are a big deal, and you kind of laid out the context that whether we like that reality or not, it's true that everybody as humans you
can't help but make judgments.
100%. Yeah.
Not to So customer came in one day. This wasn't terribly long ago, and he had an older gentleman, and if I'm saying older, he's older. He was obviously a man who had some success in his life, and was just kind of somebody we'd never seen before, and the conversation went to what we do, and he had commented that he'd been to a bank to borrow. He was building a house on the Colonial Country Club in Fort Worth. I think it was the Colonial. Anyhow, he was borrowing $multi-million to build an interim construction loan. And so he had gone in to borrow this money from this banker, and the banker shows up and he says, "Hi, I'm the so-and-so the banker, the president of the bank." And he said, "Can't do it." And he went, "What do you mean?" He said, "I'm not going to borrow $7 million from a guy in a golf shirt."
Yeah. And
left and went, and so you could argue both sides of that.
Sure.
But I still think presenting yourself in it with your best effort is important.
Yeah, I think a lot of time it boils down to understanding your context, right? A basketball coach probably doesn't need to show up in a three-piece suit, to a game. That might be a little overkill, although Jay Wright of Villanova wears some pretty expensive suits when he's coaching. But for the most part, if you're a high school basketball coach in Nazareth, where I'm from, you probably don't need to coach in a suit. But generally speaking, people are going to take you as serious as you take yourself. And one way to be earnest and to be serious and to take your work serious is the way that you present yourself.
And that doesn't go with clothes. I mean, we're just talking about clothes here.
Sure.
I mean, if you're informed when you show up, something about who you're talking to and where they're from and what they're doing and what their objectives are in their deal and what their goals are before you get there. That's the same thing. It's the same story. It's a and you don't even have to go in there and let them know you know that. It's probably better if you don't.
Sure.
But
that's a great point. That's a great point. Well, so how many years are you into HG Thrash?
30.
30 years. So what are some, so shifting away from, style and clothing and things like that. Now let's just think, just good business principles. What are some of the most fundamental things that, as you look back on 30 years of owning and running your own business, what are some of the key principles you've learned, or some of your key observations about what it's like running a business and setting yourself up for success?
Well, that's a big can of worms. So the obvious thing is that doing the right thing never goes out of style. It's just never wrong to do the right thing. Sometimes painful,
right? But
it's never wrong. There's no way. The other side of that coin is there is no way to manage a reckless or unmanageable human. Some people are just they make it really hard for us to be great, and those things we can't control. We can mitigate them. But what's important, I'm trying to answer your question. We live in our little box over there on Broadway. It's a black and white world. It's right or wrong. If we've gotten it wrong, we're sorry. We'll look you in the eyeball and tell you we're sorry, and we'll try to do better next time. I think that's really all you can do. That we joke about dry cleaners, and we have customers. That's a conversation in what we do. Customers. I'm like, look, pick one. They're all. You're going to get a load of dry cleaning that there's going to be a problem with eventually.
Right.
And that's not the question that they got it wrong or got it right. It's what they do after the fact. So if that cleaner looks up and goes, gosh, Mr. Smith, wow, I cannot believe we did that. Well, what can we do right this moment to make it right? What can I do to alleviate the pain right this second? And we'll figure out the rest of it in a day or so. Well, that's the kind of guy you want to do business with.
Right.
We're going to make mistakes in our business, just like any company will. We try to be great and have as few of them as we can. But I think the way you respond to a problem is more important than whether or not you're going to have a problem.
Yeah, I really like that advice. I mean, I try to be really honest with clients who are considering working with us and telling them up front, like we're not going to get this perfect. There are going to be moments where we drop the ball or we have too much going on, or we miss something you said or whatever. But number one, we're going to own it and we're going to make it right. So I appreciate what you're saying. And then what I'm always trying to share with our team is not perfection but progress. We don't, we're never going to be perfect. I don't expect perfection, but we have to expect progress. And I think when your clients sense that and feel that and experience it, I think it makes a huge impact. And you're in a customer service business, so all you have is the service that you're able to offer your customers. And so you've probably experienced that, more times than you can count in terms of making huge impact on the success of your business.
Yes. Lots of thoughts are blowing into my head. I mean, I'm highly ADD, and so I'm just, it's like a box full of squirrels. It's that's we just kind of dwelled on how to manage a train wreck. Let me tell you about what we get to experience. We get to experience most everything that is a part of what we do is a fun and positive thing. Yesterday we were at the Taylor stayed till 6:30 to get a woman's clothes. A woman was coming to pick up her husband's clothes. They had not an emergency trip. They're headed to Cancun for a week, and they needed some stuff, and they needed it altered, and we were able to, we have our own tailor shop in our own store. We were able to manage that for them. So that's just one example. But my point is, it's a wedding. It's a trip to Europe. It's a bar mitzvah. It's a sell. Most all the stuff we get to, there's some exceptions to that, but most always we get to be part of the highlights of people's lives.
That's cool.
And therefore we get to be part of these people's lives, and we share in we know their daughter and their dog's name and we know their.
Yeah,
we know.
Yeah, and as an avid customer myself,
it's
can
a fun.
attest to that.
It's a great thing.
Yeah, and over 30 years, you've probably developed some really great relationships, getting to be a part of those stories.
We have a wealth of friends because of that store, and it's not because it's not a commercial thing. It's just we're just get the joy of being able to deal with great people.
Yeah. What are some of the greatest influences on your own leadership? So when you think of your leadership at your store, who are some of the people that have impacted your own leadership or your way of viewing your business?
Well, we can't help but whether you're in whatever business you're in, you look at other people that do what you do well. Gosh, there's all kinds of, again, here my brain goes off, but so one of the inspiration points that I have always leaned on that I think is a bit unique is we spend a lot of time have to go to New York twice a year for business. There's some vendors from Europe that we don't see there. We don't get to see them. And also even some of the American vendors, if we don't see them there, we don't get to see the kind of the really good presentation that they give us. And so we're in New York a week at a time, at least twice a year, and sometimes more. We don't see shows, but we do avail ourselves of wonderful restaurants. And in that environment, that compressed part of one of the greatest cities in the world, the restaurants tend to be really good at what they do, whether it's your taste or not. So one of my inspiration points for me, and one of the things I've turned Jeremy on to is watch how well each of the actors in that restaurant, whether it's the coat check girl, or it's your waiter, or it's the chef, or the bartender, just watch with the grace and dignity and professionalism that they conduct themselves, and that's an inspiration point for me.
That's cool.
Jeremy's recollection, if he were here, is that he's said it too many times in public, is that I took him to a really great restaurant there, and on his first trip, and he was astonished at the passion of the bread guy. The bread guy was 55 years old, and he was proud to be the bread guy, and was great with it, and knew he pulled his deal, and he made his presentation and told you about each one of these different types of bread, and and it was, that's my point. So that's a great thing. But, as I get another great thing that I've been kind of latched onto lately, and I'm going to explore it even further, is I've started reading. Right now, I'm reading a book called Rebel Yell, which is about Stonewall Jackson, and really all the other, actors in the Civil War, and I think I get inspiration from tactics, from military tactics. I remember another book years ago that talked about, it was a naval it was a Battle of Midway, I think it was. I don't remember the name of the book, but the question was, we know that there's one battleship right there, but there's 3 more out here we don't know where they are, and the guy goes, well, what should we do, Captain? And Captain goes, well, we don't know where those 3 are, but we do know where this one is. Everybody, we're going to pounce on this one. Instead of, and there's a lesson there. I mean, but I'm right in the middle of this one about this book, Rebel Yell, and it's really interesting it's how good. It's really good.
Really
book.
good.
And I'm only about halfway through it.
Yeah,
but
it's long.
It's
we listened to
book.
it last summer on audiobook, traveling, and it was phenomenally good.
So
no, that's all really good. So you're in a retail environment, and it's you're always open. There's not a lot of time where you have downtime. So how have you over the last 30 years balanced kind of running your business, presenting a good service to your customers, but having a, kind of balanced approach to life. Like, what does that look like for you, and what does that even mean to you?
Say it again.
So how do you balance work and life? You work in a retail environment where you're always on. Like, you can't just be open 2 days a week. So how do you balance
it
that?
is my life, and I love it, and I told you why I love it. I have great customers, and I am in an industry with great people, and it's an honorable profession, and all those things said. It is my perspective that if I sell somebody another pair of socks, it is not going to benefit them or me. We're in the customer service business, and we want to help you as best as we can. And so there's no chalkboard. There is no number that we sell enough. If we sell this much more, we're going to be that much better off. That is not it. Therefore, I have a life outside of what I do. And I have friends that have these stores that's all they do. If they go to church on Sunday, they go drop their wife off at the house don't even go to lunch. They go back down to their store so they can pour over their QuickBooks or something.
Yeah.
That's not who we are. And that's just a decision. Maybe it's my personality. Maybe it's my faith. Faith is a big part of my life as well. And it tends to pull you away from letting you get too overly committed to a business.
Right.
My children, although they think I don't love them because I'm so kind of mean, I love them, and I would do anything for them, and they are a huge part of my life, and they would come before that store if it came to it. My wife, same thing.
So those things have really grounded you.
It's more perspective than it is about some sort of method I have.
Yeah, that's good. Those things really ground you and give you much greater purpose, than just the net result of your actual work.
Well, yeah. Work is work. I'm blessed to have a job that I love.
Right.
And I'm blessed to have other people that are involved with me that love what I do. What a blessing. I've got friends that have professional careers. Pick a professional career. I'm not going to pick on any particular one, that hate what they do. They make great money. But they just
don't love the work.
They don't love the work.
Yeah.
They love parts of it. But, they make. But
I think that's really profound what you said about your, family, your faith, things outside of work. I feel like a lot of people who listen to this are younger leaders. And I think something that is really critical to pick up on what you shared is if you don't have these other things that are really grounding you and that you can stay connected to, it's really easy for your work to become your identity, whether you enjoy it or not. If you don't have these other things that ground you or kind of that you can connect to that help you maintain a balance, you can get really out of whack really quick, because you only have one identity. And if it's your work, then your whole identity ebbs and flows with the value of the work, the nature of the work, the ups and downs of the work, how much you love the work in any given day. Whereas when you have these other things to really be grounded to, it can make a huge impact on creating this kind of, nebulous thing people talk about in terms of, work-life balance, which could be a whole podcast because I hate the phrase anyway, but it's good. It's really good insight.
Well, you just, if you're speaking to a younger person, the thing that I would tell I have sons that are 24 and 26 years old, and one of the things that I hope they've learned is that there is no shortcut. If you show up 2 hours ahead of the rest of the crew and stay 2 hours late, or it may only be 20 minutes, you're going to probably have a better chance to succeed. And if you're not working 60 hours a week, you don't have a job. I mean, this idea that you're going to work 40 hours a week and somehow get ahead, it's just it's silly.
Yeah.
But you've got to have balance. You've got to have reality. You can't let the dollar be your god.
No, that's good stuff. Last question for you. If you could talk to your 30-year-old self, so if you could go back 20, 25 years, you're 5 years into starting and running your business roughly, what would you tell your 35-year-old self? When you look back, when you think of all the things you've learned, what advice would you give your 30-year-old self?
Expose yourself to only quality people as much as you can. The things that would probably be the biggest thing. Spend as much time with quality people that you may even think are bigger and better and stronger and smarter than you. Would be the number one thing. Tons of little things. Read voraciously. Sleep 8 hours a night. Alcohol slows you down, and trust me, I drink alcohol on a regular basis. But when you're 30 years old, you think that there's not enough in you. That's a stupid thing to talk about. But my point is, exercise, take care of yourself, sleep 8 hours, but expose yourself to the greatest people you can. And you are smarter than you think you are, but keep it to yourself. You really are smarter than you think you are. But don't let anybody, keep it to yourself.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Well, Howard, thanks for joining us, and thanks for starting HG Thrash over 30 years ago. It's brought a lot of value to my life.
Whatever.
And, no, I'm serious. I've loved getting to know you and Jeremy, and learning more about clothes and style, and I'm a faithful customer now, and as long as my wife doesn't get in the way, I plan on being a faithful customer for a long time. So thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.